Hello, everyone. You're listening to the Small Business Show. My name is Swire Ho, your host for the show. My guest today is Matt Banker from Banker Creative. He's the founder and lead strategist at Banker Creative, a world-first web design firm. Matt knows that writing is hard for most business owners. He helps businesses communicate in a way that is authentic and doesn't feel contrived or salesy. How you doing, Matt?
I am doing great. Thanks for having me, Swire.
Hey, Matt, I love to get on to all the questions with you. For listener who might not yet be familiar with your work, what should they know about you and Banker Creative?
Yeah, well, the probably the core of what we are, we're a web design agency. I have a background in art and design, but really what sets us apart and what I'm really interested in is words first. So we call ourselves a words first agency, and that means we really believe design is super important, but it's the words that you use, the messaging, the copy, the content that really helps your digital marketing actually drive results. And so we're very focused on messaging and clarity. And we use something called the Story Brand 7-part framework as the core to how we help businesses clarify their messaging and get really good content and copy on their websites.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. When we had the pre-interview, you recommended that book, and I actually read that book. It's actually by Donald Miller.
That's right.
If you haven't read that book, you owe it to yourself. You got to read it, even if you have no idea what it is and the concept itself. It's life changing. I'm using a lot of it right now myself.
Mhm. So I always love talking with people who have kind of recently been introduced or read the Story Brand book. When you read it, what was the big takeaway that you found from the book?
Right now, what I'm using, and my business partner actually don't like that name. He called it the drip email.
Mm,
So what it is when someone contact me, right, a prospect, and then obviously I'll provide the information, but I'm crafting email that are not salesy. It's not
yeah.
related to sales at all. I send them an email to share resources. How do you find
Mm,
your persona for your buyer persona? How do you actually doing another one drip email? How do you buy promotional product cheaper?
mm.
So, and then another email that I'm thinking about, and then at the end, I will ask to connect or my ask, right? So I think I'm interested to see how that's going to work, and you know, providing value before asking. I think that's like the biggest takeaway from the book.
Yeah. For people that aren't super familiar with StoryBrand, if I had to boil it down to two main concepts, it's this. One is that clear is better than clever. And so in most of the cases, you're not actually competing against other folks who are in your industry or in your who you might think of as direct competitors. You're competing against a more generalized noise that's out there in the world. We're bombarded by so many marketing messages and so many things, and we've all had that experience where you land on a website or you see an ad and you think, I have no idea what these people do. And so like being clarity is the first important main piece, I think, of when you think of story brand. The second one is you are not the hero. Your company is not the
Mm.
hero. Your customer is the hero. And so a lot of what you're talking about, Swire, having an attitude of you're the helpful guide in your customer's adventure in their journey. And so by providing that educational material, by providing value through your email drip campaign, what you're doing is you're establishing yourself as a guide, not as like a vendor. The big difference that in my world, I do a lot of marketing stuff, but the idea is I want folks to think of me not as an order taker, but as the guide, right? And so if you're an order taker, whether you're in marketing or accounting or anything else, what that means is that the client has to direct you on what to do. But
Mm.
when you're a guide, you come to them and you're able to present them with the way forward. And that's actually what most people want. They don't want to have to figure it out themselves. They want someone who has already figured it out, giving them the direction of where to go and why they should make the decisions that they should make.
Yeah, I think a lot of good points in there. I think at some point I have to reread that book because
Mm,
there's so many things. Every time I reading it, I'm writing stuff down to do. There's a lot of stuff to do, and I think that goes. The question goes back to you, Matt. With your expertise,
Mhm.
I think the book said when people ask you what do you do, a lot of us say, the example that they have, I own a gym, or they go on a
Mhm.
30-minute round story about why they do it. So a lot of people are actually don't convey the message to people what do they
Mhm.
really do. And when it comes to a website, when people go to your website, a lot of time, especially I go to some big companies websites too, like I look at their website, what do you do? Like
Mhm.
obviously they have multiple departments, they have a lot of things that they do, but by looking at the front page of your website, can visitor know exactly what you do? Can you speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, so I spend a lot of time looking at websites and working with business owners on their websites. The first thing is when someone lands, it's important to know you really only have a few seconds to make an impression. And any amount of extra work that you make your customers or your clients do in order to understand who you are, what you do, how to get it, you're actually losing sales. So I think of it as like the multiple tabs problem, right? Someone does a Google search, they see your company. This is how I work. Maybe not everybody does it exactly this way, but I'll like open in a new tab, like 3 or 4 of those links that show up, and then I'll just go kind of one to one through them. And I mean, maybe I'm a jerk for not giving these companies enough time, but I think this is how most people interact with websites. You glance at it really quick. You might scroll down the page because you're trying to get an idea of what it is that this company does. So we like to say you have about 5 seconds to make an impression on someone. And
Hmm.
so in that hero section, you have to answer 3 questions almost immediately. So number one is, what exactly is it that you do? And so your website should, in very plain English, describe exactly what you are, what service or product you have, and what problem it solves, something like that. You also need to communicate, how does it make my life better? So there has to be some sort of aspirational aspect. So, if I work with a lot of accounting firm owners, for example. If you land on an accounting firm website and it just says accounting services or accounting and bookkeeping services, I mean, yeah, I know exactly what you do, but I'm not sure how that makes my life better. If it
Mhm.
says helping you have a more profitable business, that makes my life better. And then underneath there, maybe in the subheadline, it says accounting and advisory services for small businesses in Denver, something like that. Those are the 2 questions. What do you do? How's it going to make my life better? And then 3 is, how do you get it? It's surprising how few or how many customers that or clients that I've worked with, websites that I visit, don't have a clear next step or call to action. They have a contact page, but they don't have a button that says schedule a call, or a button that says buy now. Or if they do have something like that, it's not as obvious as it should be. Now, most people won't click on your buy now button that's in that hero section, but you're embedding that into their brain immediately about how do you work with them, and then they'll see that button throughout your site. So it's really important to have it there right at the beginning. So
Mm.
that's kind of a long way of saying, basically you have to say, what do you do? How's it going to make my life better? And how do I get it? And you've got 5 seconds to communicate that.
Yeah, it's so interesting why when we think about our business, we think about how great we are, like the features and benefits. But in a
Mm-hmm.
customer mind, they don't really care. Like it's great, if you are, the top of what you do, but really they want to do is, can this person or company help me? And if you can
Mm-hmm.
relate the message to them, then you might get a customer.
Yeah, it's a subtle shift, right? From moving from being the hero to being the guide. But if you think about it, like in the situation of a story, so let's use Star Wars as an example, right? Luke Skywalker is the hero, and in the first one, the 1978, original one, Obi-Wan Kenobi is the guide. Obi-Wan is the stronger character. They're the wiser character. That's the person who already knows what they're doing. The hero of the story is the weak character. They're the one who is on a journey, but they haven't arrived there yet. So it's a subtle shift. But when you become the guide, you're actually elevating your brand, not like trying to hide it more. But what you're trying to do is really say, you're not trying to explain what your story is as a company. What you're trying to explain is we understand our customer's story, and here's where we interact with it. Here's where we come in. You're on a journey, and we're here to help you accomplish your dreams and your goals, whatever that is, instead of just trying to explain to you how great we are at whatever it is that we do.
That's easier said than done. All of us want to be the hero.
It is easier said than done. I have done the messaging and done my own website before. By far, doing it myself was the hardest website I worked on at all. It's much easier as a consultant or as a third-party person to go and help someone else figure out their messaging. It's much harder to just do it for yourself.
Mhm. And I want to ask you for your input on this because depending on, right, I've had the conversation actually on the show before, and I really like, what you are, sending me for a talking point. Don't write for bots, write for people.
Mhm.
What do you mean by that? Obviously we need to optimize our website so it gets found, right?
Yes.
So, and especially when I do a Google search right now, the top, I would say 5 websites are irrelevant because, if I say, how do I, get fit, then the first 5 will just be bullet points, and then I see a bunch of ads. So they don't really are written for me, really. I have no interest in reading that. So how do you balance it? Obviously, we want to be found, but then when we get there, we also want people to actually read the website, right?
Well, where I would start from is most business owners think that what they need is just more traffic, right? And so whether that's like a salesperson, I just need more leads that I can follow up with, or it's a website, I just need more traffic, and then more people are going to click to buy. But a lot of times that's like step 3 or 4. What you really need to do is you need to make sure to optimize the site that you have for the traffic that is already coming to your site. And so I always start from, the goal is to speak to people. There's a lot of, but it's really focused on the conversion side. So when they're on your website, you really want people to understand who you are. You want to show understanding and empathy for your customers. You want to, have a compelling offer, clearly communicated. And so we always start by thinking about, like, who is the person who's reading this. Now, it doesn't mean that we ignore SEO. There are certain industries where that's a lot more important than others. And if you have really important keywords, then you want to focus on those. But we start from the standpoint, not of like the keyword or the Google search. And instead, we start from the standpoint of what does the person need from this. And really strategically, the goal is we're trying to maximize conversions of the clients that are already there, because the best leads you get are people who are being referred to you or who are finding you on their own organically. And often, when you're in a Google search, you're in competition with all these other sites. And so it's already, that attention is split. But if you can maximize the traffic that does land on your site, that tends to be a better, you can get more bang for your buck doing that than just trying to maximize the search volume. At least that's my perspective.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Writing for a bot and writing for a human. I know that myself, like with the hobbies and interests that I have, I follow and bookmark a lot of websites that the design itself, it's not great. Like all names, they're not great, but I really enjoy the content. I know that it's written by the people behind the brand, and then they're actually creating something very useful. And I also sign up for the newsletter. They have call to action. I've been to their workshops, but the website is not great. So, like, how should we really balance it? Like, should we spend most of our time to design a website like our industry FH, or really should dig deeper to find out what kind of words or what kind of topics really relate to the target audience?
Yeah, I feel like we've gone through a fairly lengthy period where being found was the primary mode of marketing, right? So Google Ads, SEO, all these funnels and things. And I think where we're going, I think we're in it already now, but I think it's accelerating with AI, is that we're moving into, and it's cyclical. I think this has been true throughout history in sales and marketing. People want to buy from people. They want to have a connection to the brand, and I think that's especially true for smaller businesses. And so, in a lot of cases, I would rather have an authentic voice, the owner, the subject matter expert, being a part of the face of the brand, and communicating, being that guide, being the helpful educator in their role, for their clients or for their industry, and focus on that rather than a faceless company. And that's tough for some business owners. They don't want to be the face of the company, or if you're a CEO, you don't have an owner, you have a board of directors, but the CEO, it can be transient, right? That person could get fired if so you don't want to build a brand on a person that's not going to stick around, right? So it's not, it's not perfect in every case, but the people to people side of things, I think, is accelerating. And the reason I think that's accelerating, even, with the advent of AI, is that it's easier and easier to generate massive amounts of content that never have a human touch. But I've read a lot of AI generated content, and it's not very good out, directly from ChatGPT. A person who edits it or a person who writes something compelling. I think that you're going to see more and more people wanting to connect directly to a person and knowing it's not coming from a robot, or that it's written for a robot.
So what's your take on that in the industry? So I think, myself included, ChatGPT and Grammarly had shaped me where I am today. Really, I I
Yeah.
would think, but you could, like you're saying, it's good if you wanted to pull a general idea out of something, but to really to develop a tone of voice, I think it's yet to be there. And then, what, as a professional doing, professional websites, what are your thoughts on that? Should we rely on it, or really should we going back to the thinking process? So I think, what are your takes?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot. So I think the first thing I'll say is AI is here for sure, and it's here for marketing. And if you're a marketing agency or freelancer, you need to be embracing the tools that these AI, ChatGPT and others are bringing. It's not widely accepted yet by the general public, but in our spaces, everybody's using it, and you should be. You should be playing around with it. You should be looking to see how it can make your life easier. I've been doing a lot of thinking for my own business around how this affects things at a little bit of a higher level. And so, I think one of the big things is AI, like ChatGPT. It has the opinions of the internet, and the internet can be pretty dumb a lot of the time, right? Either it's just like common sense, everybody should know this type of information, or you get these consensus views, or you have a topic that's been dominated by SEO, and so a lot of these pages are just kind of copies of each other with written a little different for keyword optimization. And what it lacks often is true insight, like deep insight that comes from an expert. And so we believe, you should use AI tools to help accelerate or even amplify the work that you're doing. But ultimately, the insight comes from a person, from an expert who can have an interesting and a different point of view. You can't rely on ChatGPT to be right about things. You can't rely on it to be terribly interesting. But what it can do is create a really fast first draft. So whether that's, we could take our conversation today for the podcast, drop it into a transcription software, have ChatGPT write an article based on what we talked about, from that transcription. And it could be a nice, 2,000 word article. But if you don't go back and edit it, you probably are going to miss out on some of the great wisdom that Swire and I are sharing here today. It might not get the nuance of it. It might even get some things wrong. Like it could assume that when I'm talking about writing for people, not robots, what I mean is that you have to do really great keyword SEO research, and that's not really what I'm saying. So it could get it wrong, and you have to really, you have to use it as a tool. There's a phrase that we use that it's the artist that paints, not the brush, right?
Yeah, I think the humor is the one thing that they don't get it right. And I like what you're saying because the thinking process is still a human, like especially
Mm,
if you are a professional in your field. That's something got to
yeah.
be unique for you. Going to your audience, right? Accounting firm, all of them, I'm sure that do work with numbers. They will somehow balance it. So on the bottom line, everything is balanced, everything is happy. But in between, there are always uniqueness for each
Mhm.
firm. Maybe I'm focusing on agricultural, maybe I'm
Yeah.
financial, maybe I do something else that unique what I do. So if you
Mhm.
go in a general approach, yes, they do help you to do the math in your company, but what is it in between? What is so unique about what you do? So I think that's something is
Mhm.
still it requires a human, and that's the thing that why makes you unique versus your competitors.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of cases where you need to write for yourself as much or more than you need to write for your audience. So I one of the ways that I figure out what do I think about a topic or, develop a better understanding, a better way to be able to explain things to my clients is just through the process of writing. And so if you outsource all of that writing to an AI, you're missing out on all the personal growth that you are going to be gaining as an individual, through that process. The same thing is true. So we use the story brand method, and I often will work with uh, a company or an organization, a company owner or an organization leader, and we'll go through this process of developing what we call their brand script. And the first meeting is usually 90 minutes of us asking questions about the customer and trying to understand the problem that they have and what is it that they really want and all these things. And ChatGPT knows the story brand framework. You could go to ChatGPT and say, "Hey, I've got a, you
I
know,
tried it actually.
yeah, you could say, "Hey, write me a brand script," and it'll write something that's not too bad. But what
Mm.
you miss out on is the learning that happens in the process of doing the work. And so as a business owner, every time I've worked with a client, the business owners come through that and say, "Oh, wow, that's so amazing. I actually understand what we do more clearly now than I ever have before." Or it's not uncommon for them to say, "We've been trying to articulate this for 3 years, and what you've been able to do in 90 minutes, is more than we could get done in those 3 years." And that process, though, is an important part of the experience, not just making some things more efficient. Actually, is is less valuable, I guess. So you have to be careful about when you want to use these tools to make sure that you're using them in ways that are beneficial for your business and that are beneficial for you, that you're not actually accidentally shortcutting the learning and the growth that you're doing as your own business leader.
Yeah, it's just thinking of, if you want to stand out in your industry. Obviously, everyone, if I ask them that question, they said, yeah, we're the best. We are the standout in our industry.
Mhm.
But if you all use ChatGPT example, for example, in the future, then all of you will look kind of the same or at least,
Mhm.
somewhat similar. But what if you can really spend the time to improve yourself, to develop your tone of voice, then you stand
Mhm.
out. It's kind of like when you go to a meeting, everyone's dressing in black suits and tie, and you wear a yellow suit, then you're going to
Mhm.
stand out, obviously in the right way, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's something we have to think about. It's a good tools to use,
Mhm.
but it's not everything that is meant for the company.
Yeah. Well, I love that. I'm glad you brought up the suit metaphor because I have my own version
You
of
have a
the suit
yellow suit.
metaphor. So I don't have a yellow suit, but I talk with people a lot about, like, your website is like a suit. And so, if you're showing up for a sales call in, an outdated, ratty suit that's, kind of threadbare or, doesn't match your shoes, like ill fitting, all of these things, it says nothing. I mean, realistically, it's just appearances. It says
Mm.
nothing about your ability to do the work, but it does communicate a lot to whoever you're meeting with. Is there something about, if you're sloppy, uh, people will assume that, oh, your business probably isn't super put together. If you're outdated, they're going to assume, oh, you use old processes. It's going to be really slow or difficult to work with. That is the same thing with your website. There's a lot of companies who I see this a lot with, especially like multi-generation companies or ones that have been around for a long time. They're doing, millions of dollars of revenue every year, and their websites are terrible. And they're in this like transition zone where they haven't needed their digital marketing to really do anything for them, but maybe a legacy sales guy retires, or maybe it moves from father to son or daughter. The business changes hands, and all of a sudden the way you need to get business is no longer through those person-to-person relationships, but it's digital marketing. Well, your website is like an old outdated ratty suit that people are looking at, and it doesn't have it. They don't know you, they don't know that you're great at in your industry, they don't know your reputation. All they see is this first impression of the website. It's confusing, it's outdated, it's old, and it's telling people that you don't really know what you're doing as a business, even if you do, right? And so I think of it's unfortunate sometimes, because the quality of a website rarely is correlated directly to the quality of a company. But when it comes to new business, it sure does communicate a lot, especially in that first impression.
Well, I think since we're on the topic of fashion, a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
kind of, right? You have to really answer that question. Who are your target audience? Like you said,
Mm-hmm.
Matt, if I'm really targeting loose individual, and if what
Mm-hmm.
I do really just cater to these people, then you could stick with what you do works for them.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe I'm targeting high net worth individual. They
Yeah.
expect something else. Or maybe I only target millennials. So there's something
Mm-hmm.
that they connect to. You know, don't try to be everything for everyone. That's where you
Yeah.
lose focus. And I think if you agree with me, Matt, like they should figure out who their target audience is before even reach out to you. Would you think that that's fair?
Yeah. I mean, understanding who your core audience, your ideal customer is, makes everything so much easier. We go through a little bit of that process, but usually um, you could dig a lot deeper than what I can do in a 90-minute strategy session about your messaging. If you really know, this is our specific audience. Now, one of the things I found is a lot of business owners, they actually have trouble not so much identifying who their target audience is, but narrowing it down to
They
just
don't
a
want to miss
few
out.
person.
We can
Yeah,
help everyone. We
we
can.
can help everyone. And I think what's important to remember is you can't be known for everything. And the riches are in the niches, right? Having a more targeted customer persona that you're going after actually makes business growth easier. It doesn't feel like that. You usually think, well, I don't want to leave anyone out. But I always think about it. There's a difference between your target, which is pretty narrow, right? These are exactly the people we want to go after. This is what our marketing is focused around. This is what our outbound sales is going to be focused on. So it's very narrow, and that as narrow as you can make that, as long as there's still a good enough market there for you, the better. And then outside of that, you've got your market. So you've got your target in the middle, and then you've got your market, which is everybody that you're willing to work with or who could be a customer. That target is my perfect ideal customer. That market is a little bit broader. And the mistake that people make is they think that they should market to that broader category, but really they should be focused on marketing for their target and then being open to working with everyone else. And then beyond that, there's another ring, which is not our market. So there should be lines around who you're a good fit for and who you're not a good fit for. It should be really clear on your website. The best brands in the world are not for everybody. The cheapest brands in the world are, right? Like you know, fast food restaurants, the Walmarts of the world, those tend to be for everyone, but they also tend to compete on price. And if you're a small business owner, you'd never want to be competing on price. You want to be competing on expertise and service and all kinds of other things, quality, but not on price.
Well, I think even for a fast food company, they know, then they do have target audience. They know exactly who they target.
Mhm.
You won't see a fast food restaurant ads on like luxury, neighborhoods, or they know
Mhm.
exactly where to go. Or if I've been to overseas vacation where I don't know any of the food and I'm really hungry. I know
Yeah,
the brand, and I just want something cheap and
predictable.
fast, predictable. Yeah, and they taste the same wherever you
Yes.
go in the world. So I think that they know exactly the target audience. I wanted to ask you, and we kind of go through some of the common mistakes here, and really
Mhm.
I think for people that I talk to, I'm sure that sounds like you have the same situation as well. People don't want to miss out. They might not want to focus too deep.
Mhm.
What are other common mistakes out there, and how would you really, guide us to be on the right track? And I think you could have developed into a different market in the beginning, but in do you would you suggest that we focus one to when especially when designing a website, or how many different target audience should we have
Mm.
in mind? Let's assume that we want to redesign a website.
Yeah, so some of the most common mistakes I see with websites, well, one is getting things in the wrong order. So the way I say it is sending good traffic to a bad website. So that
Hmm.
kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. If you think what I really need is just more traffic, no, start with your segmentation, identifying your ideal customer, work on the messaging and work on the website to make sure that it's very clear what you do. So that would be the first thing that I always tell people to start with is think about your messaging. The nice thing is it's also one of the easier things to fix, right? It doesn't take a ton to update the messaging that is on your website. It's a bit more to do a website redesign. That can be a pretty big project for some folks, but uh, it's not the most difficult thing, right? So that's a really common mistake. Some of the other mistakes are, so I own a marketing agency, and you have to think about how, if you're going to do marketing, how are you going to budget for it? And so a mistake that a lot of people make, and this is going to sound a little self-serving, but they spend the wrong amount of money on
Hmm.
marketing because they don't have a real understanding of how to budget for marketing. You pay for marketing in three ways. You have to pay for good ideas, and that's usually called strategy. Someone needs to have an idea of what you should do, why you should do it, how you do it, all that. Then you have to pay for the time or the labor of designing things, writing things, setting up campaigns, whatever it is. And then you have to pay for distribution. Now, the good news is you can pay for these three things with time or money. You don't have to hire someone else to do it. You can read StoryBrand, you can work on your own brand script, you can learn how to design your website. That's all time as a business owner. And sometimes when you're starting out or you're really small, you don't have any money, but you have lots of time. Well, actually, usually you don't have any money or time, but you definitely don't have any money, and so you've got to find the time, right? And that's the pathway that's available to you. But the way that people spend the wrong amount of money is when they don't pay for one of those three things, right?
Hmm.
And so they, instead of getting a good strategy, they just respond to some cold call about, hey, we'll get you a bunch of leads overnight and it'll be super cheap. And it turns out that it's not really a great strategy. It's just a plug and play kind of thing that this company does, and it doesn't result in any leads. Or maybe you pay for a strategist, but you don't have any money budgeted for actually executing what you're going to do. Or maybe you get paralyzed by just thinking about your marketing all the time because you're spending so much time on it, but you never get around to actually executing and do it. And then the third is maybe you've got a great strategy, you've got great content or marketing assets that you're creating, but you have no way to really get it out into the world. So you create a great podcast, but nobody listens to it because you're not publishing it on LinkedIn regularly, or you're not sharing it and sending it out by email, or you're not paying for ads. You just hope people will stumble upon it. It could be the best podcast or the best, marketing like offer in the world, but if it doesn't get out into the world, then it ends up being a waste of money. And so what happens, the worst thing is when people pay for two out of the three, but they don't pay for the third. And what happens is that means it's really expensive. I paid for a great strategist, I pay for a great production team, or I put a lot of time into my production, and then I don't distribute it. Wow, that's a really expensive way to not get to the results that you want. And companies do this all the time. One of those three things is missing, and they end up spending what feels like a lot of money without a lot of results because they haven't committed quite enough resources in total to get them to that end point that they actually are hoping for.
I think it's very important key point, right? You have to get all three right. So maybe you have a certain budget. You just have to figure out, how you best use of the money, through each category. Like you said, if you build something that super nice, 100% conversion. But if
Hmm.
no one knows about it, that doesn't really help you at all. So
No.
I think that's really good advice on really I could plug into any type of industry, right?
Hmm.
If you don't spend the time, then you would just be you try to copy what your competitor is doing, and your
Hmm.
competitor is like 100 times bigger than you do.
Yeah.
That's why you're out of business, right? And then
Right.
if you are not really doing the work to make it look nice or at least industry standard, then you'll be
Hmm.
subpar, and then you never get to where they are. And finally, if no one knows about it, then just no one knows
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah, and like I said, you can pay in time or you can pay in money. There's a lot of if you own a business, you are an entrepreneurial person. You're smart. You've probably made your living by figuring stuff out, right? You can problem solve. And so I'm convinced any business owner can learn how to do all of the things needed for marketing. The question is that the best use of your time? Sometimes it is, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's better to bring in an expert or hire people, pay. Sometimes it's better to throw dollars at something. Sometimes it's better to throw hours at something. And you got to figure out what your own, capacity and resources are to make sure that you're investing that wisely.
I think we're going on the right track here for advising people what to do. What if customer listener have more in-depth question, and what would be the best way to reach out to you, Matt?
Uh, Best way would be connect with me on LinkedIn. That's where I'm most active. I post my thoughts and videos there. I have a podcast called Words First Marketing, which is we talk about how to use the story brand method and implement that in your marketing for different industries and in different ways. So those would be the best ways. If you're an accounting firm owner, I also have a separate kind of brand that's just focused on accounting firm owners. And so just find me on LinkedIn, though. You'll find all of that information there.
Thank you so much, Matt. Gave me a lot to think about, and really, truly, thank you for sharing all the information.
Yeah, this has been great, Swire. Thanks for having me.
All right.